Real English Podcast.
Speak English with ease.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. Today's topic is something close to my heart too, learning a language by living abroad. My guest, Marco, spent a whole year immersed in an English-speaking country, and honestly, I did something similar myself a few years ago in Spain, so I think this conversation is going to be a fun one.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that. So you already know the struggle then.
Definitely. I remember the first week feeling like everyone was speaking twice as fast as normal. Was it the same for you?
Exactly the same. But what really surprised me is that researchers actually have an explanation for that. It's called auditory processing speed. Basically, your brain isn't used to filtering unfamiliar sounds quickly, so speech genuinely sounds faster than it is.
That's fascinating. I never knew there was a scientific reason behind it. I always just assumed people were speaking unusually fast on purpose. That actually makes me feel better about how lost I felt those first few weeks.
Right, it's not just in your head. And from what I read, this feeling usually fades after about 3 to 4 weeks of constant exposure once your brain adjusts.
That matches my experience too. After about a month, things suddenly seemed to slow down. Speaking of adjusting, for me, the biggest challenge wasn't listening, it was speaking without overthinking. I used to translate every sentence in my head before saying it, which made me sound really unnatural.
I had that exact problem. What helped me break that habit was something called shadowing. Have you heard of it?
I've heard the term, but tell our listeners what it actually means.
Sure. Shadowing means listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say almost at the same time, copying their rhythm and pronunciation instead of thinking about grammar. I did it every morning with podcasts, and after a couple of months, I noticed I stopped translating in my head completely.
That's such a useful tip. I actually used a different method. I found a language partner and we did what's called a language exchange, where we'd speak 30 minutes in English and 30 minutes in Spanish. It forced me to think on the spot instead of planning my sentences perfectly.
That's smart, because it removes the safety net. When I made local friends, my speaking definitely improved faster than in any classroom. Mistakes also became less scary once people started laughing with me instead of at me.
Speaking of mistakes, did you have any embarrassing ones?
Oh, plenty. Once I tried to order rice at a restaurant but accidentally asked for a plate of ears instead. The waiter just froze for a second before we both burst out laughing.
That's brilliant. Honestly, I think mistakes like that stick in your memory precisely because they're embarrassing. Your brain remembers emotional moments much better than boring textbook sentences.
That's a good point, actually. I never thought about it that way, but it makes total sense. There's actually a term for that too. I think it's called the emotional memory effect. Moments tied to strong feelings, whether it's embarrassment, excitement, or even fear, get stored more deeply than neutral information.
That explains why I still remember the exact sentence I messed up on my first day in Madrid, but I can barely remember what I studied last week. Let's shift a bit. What about culture? Did you find it hard to adjust to cultural differences, not just the language itself?
Actually, yes, and I think people underestimate how connected culture and language really are. For example, in my home country, we're very direct. We say exactly what we think. But where I was living, people used a lot of indirect expressions to be polite, and at first I completely missed the real meaning behind what they were saying.
Can you give an example?
Sure, someone once told me, "That's an interesting idea," and I thought they liked my suggestion. Later, a friend explained to me that in that context it actually meant they disagreed but didn't want to say so directly.
Oh, that's such a classic example of a cultural misunderstanding. I had something similar. Where I lived, silence during a conversation was seen as respectful, almost like giving the other person space to think. But in my culture, silence usually means something's wrong, so I kept apologizing for no reason, thinking I had offended someone.
That's exactly it. Learning a language isn't just memorizing words, it's learning a whole new way of thinking and interacting with people.
Completely agree. So let's talk resources for a bit. What tools or materials did you personally rely on the most during your year abroad?
Honestly, podcasts were my #1 resource, ironically enough, since we're recording one right now. I also used graded readers, books written specifically for language learners with simplified vocabulary, because they let me enjoy stories without constantly stopping to check a dictionary.
I love graded readers too. For me, it was more about writing. I kept a daily journal in English, even if it was just 3 or 4 sentences about my day. It forced me to actively use new vocabulary instead of just recognizing it passively.
That's a great habit. Active use versus passive recognition makes a huge difference. You can recognize 1,000 words while reading, but that doesn't mean you can actually use them in a real conversation.
Exactly, and that's honestly the biggest gap I see with many learners. They focus so much on reading and grammar exercises that speaking becomes the weakest skill simply because they never actively practice it.
True, and I'll admit, grammar was never my strong point either. I used to worry constantly about making grammar mistakes while speaking, until a teacher told me something that changed my whole mindset.
What did she say?
She said, grammar mistakes rarely stop communication, but silence always does. That stuck with me. After that, I focused on just getting my message across, even imperfectly, instead of staying quiet out of fear of sounding wrong.
That's such powerful advice, and honestly something every learner needs to hear. Let's talk about something a bit more personal. Did you ever struggle with homesickness while you were away? I imagine studying a language while also missing home must be really tough on its own.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, nobody really warned me how much homesickness would affect my learning specifically. There were weeks where I felt so drained emotionally that I didn't want to speak English at all. I just wanted to call my family and speak my native language for hours.
That's such an underrated challenge. I don't think people talk enough about the emotional side of language learning. Everyone focuses on vocabulary lists and grammar rules, but rarely on the mental exhaustion that comes with constantly operating in a second language.
Exactly. There's actually a term for that too. It's sometimes called language fatigue, where your brain simply gets tired from processing a foreign language all day, almost like a muscle that needs rest.
I've felt that so many times. By the end of the day, I'd have zero energy left to form a proper sentence, even in simple conversations. How did you deal with it?
I learned to give myself permission to rest in my native language sometimes. Watching a show or calling home wasn't cheating on my English learning. It was actually necessary to avoid burning out completely. Balance mattered more than I initially thought.
That's such healthy advice, and I think a lot of learners feel guilty resting, as if every single minute has to be spent studying. Let's move to something lighter. Did you have a favorite English show, movie, or book that helped you along the way?
Definitely. I got hooked on a British sitcom, and at first I could barely understand anything because of the accent and the fast pace of the jokes, but I kept watching with subtitles in English, not in my own language, and gradually I started catching the jokes without even pausing.
That's such a good tip. Subtitles in the target language, not your native one. I did the same with an American drama series, and I remember the moment I laughed at a joke before reading the subtitle. That felt like such a huge milestone for me.
Those little milestones really do keep you motivated, don't they? It's funny how something as small as understanding a joke can feel like such a big personal achievement.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, let's talk about motivation more generally. There must have been moments where you wanted to give up completely. How did you push through those low points?
Definitely, especially around the 3rd month. That's actually a well-known stage called the language learning plateau, where your progress seems to completely stop, even though you're still studying just as hard.
Oh, I remember that stage vividly. It's so discouraging because you feel like you're working just as hard, but nothing seems to be improving.
Exactly, but what got me through it was setting small, specific goals instead of vague ones. Instead of saying, I want to become fluent, I'd say this week I want to be able to order food confidently without hesitating. Small wins kept me motivated.
That's brilliant advice, and it's something I definitely recommend to our listeners as well. All right, last question before we close. If you could go back and give your very first day abroad self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Honestly, I'd tell myself to relax and stop trying to sound perfect. I spent so much of that first month silently rehearsing sentences in my head instead of just speaking and learning from real conversations. If I had started speaking imperfectly from day one, I think I would have progressed twice as fast.
That's such a powerful closing thought. I'd probably tell myself something similar, that discomfort is actually a sign of growth, not failure, so instead of avoiding it, you should lean into it.
Well said. Discomfort really is where the real learning happens.
So, for people who can't move abroad right now, what would you both recommend as a final takeaway? I'll start, build a daily habit. Even 15 minutes a day of real listening or speaking practice matters more than one long session per week.
I agree, and I'd add, don't wait until you feel ready to speak. Start speaking from day one, even if it's just to yourself in the mirror. Confidence comes from doing it, not from studying more grammar rules.
That's the perfect note to end on. Marco, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I actually learned something new today myself with that auditory processing point, and honestly, the plateau and homesickness discussion really resonated with me.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. This felt more like a real conversation between two language nerds than an interview.
That's exactly what we're going for. See you all next time, and remember, go make some mistakes today.
Your learning journey doesn't end here. To keep improving your English skills, click on the next video or explore the additional videos we've carefully selected for you.